If you set out and tried to be more incompetent and more stupid than the people that have been running this town for as long as I can remember, I'm not sure how you could do it. Yesterday, we were given the president's budget, which outlines the president's so-called priorities. Well, his priorities were pretty clear. Continue to expand government at the expense of the American people. Expand government, a government that is at odds with the freedom, well-being, and prosperity of the American people every single day. Simple truth is, as my friends in the House Freedom Caucus and a large number of my other colleagues in the Republican conference have been articulating, we need to shrink Washington so that we can grow America. We cannot sustain and grow out of the $32 trillion of debt and the $20 trillion of debt that the Congressional Budget Office just outlined that we're going to add over the next decade. We will not, as a country, survive through that if we do not get economic growth to the 3.5%, and 4% levels that we saw under President Reagan, President Clinton, and in previous years. And you are not going to get economic growth if you do not get the federal government off the backs of the American people and stop empowering them to target Americans, to undermine Americans' freedoms. Biden's budget would increase taxes and implement price controls to the tune of $3 trillion. That's the president's plan. And what does the media do? They run around and go, oh, he's reducing the deficit. He's reducing the debt. Yet by his own measures, he'd be increasing the debt another $17 trillion over the next decade. The American people look to this body and this town with utter amazement at how stupid we could possibly be. If you set out and tried to be more incompetent and more stupid than the people that have been running this town for as long as I can remember, I'm not sure how you could do it. Seriously, that'd be a great exercise. Could anybody, if you put together 435 people here, 100 people on the other side, presidents and bureaucrats, swapped out over the last, say, 3 decades, could it be any worse? It's like William F. Buckley said, if he'd rather be governed by the first, 435 people out of the phone book than the 435 people we send here. Is he wrong? Seriously, it'd be a great inquiry for us to consider. $32 trillion in debt. Borders wide open. We've got American citizens unable to carry out their livelihoods, men and women in uniform who are being denied promotion, the ability to do their job in the Defense Department. We've got kids shut out from their schools, forced in the corners wearing masks, mental health issues, set back generations in terms of their academic capability. That's the best we got. That's the best we can do. We reject that. We believe in America. We believe in Americans. We do not believe that investing in Washington, investing in the federal bureaucracy is good for the American people. We believe the opposite. So the president wants to tax and regulate $3 trillion to save increasing the debt $3 trillion over the next decade down to $17 trillion. Ooh, boy, that'll do it. We propose an immediate savings of $3 trillion right now by cutting back the woke, weaponized federal bureaucracy that is undermining the freedom of the American people so that we can make them more free and prosperous so that they can grow this economy, so we can shrink the deficit, reduce debt, and reclaim the inheritance of being an American for our kids and grandkids. Think about what Biden's budget would do. It would spend a total of $6.8 trillion next year, $500 billion more than this year. $2 billion for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives to increase regulation of the firearms industry. I got thousands of Texans that I represent who are facing being made a felon because a bureaucrat at ATF decided what precisely a pistol brace might mean for how their gun is regulated. Think about that. There's some guy, some gal sitting in Central Texas, bought a weapon under the law. Now a bureaucrat says, you've got to do this, register this, or you're a felon. Now, I think the court will strike that down as unconstitutional, but why would this body, why would any Republican fund the bureaucracy that's going to make a felon out of a law-abiding citizen back home? So to my Republican colleagues, don't do that. How about $3.9 billion for the Department of Homeland Security's climate resilience programs? I didn't think about that. $3.9 billion for the Department of Homeland Security, which, by the way, refuses to secure the homeland, allows 72,000 Americans to die from fentanyl poisoning, allows cartels to get empowered and slaughter Americans in the streets of Matamoros in northern Mexico without a peep from this administration. Nothing. Let's give that department $3.9 billion for climate resilience programs. Does anybody wonder why the American people look at us and say, what in the hell are you doing? $2 billion increase for the EPA to target American energy. Now, I want to remind people, I want to remind all the kids out there watching this going, oh my God, but the world is going to die. We're going to end the climate change. We're going to get extinguished. Oh, really? Oh, really? Why is it that my Democrat colleagues who believe that the production of CO2 is going to be the end to humanity and the earth as we know it will not remotely consider nuclear power, which produces not an ounce of CO2? But they won't consider it. Why? Because it's a religion. It's climate fetishism. It's about government control. It's about being able to target the oil and gas industry to undermine the well-being of the American people by empowering bureaucrats so they can feel good about themselves, while China continues to pump out more CO2 than any other country, ratcheting it up week by week. 1,100 coal-fired plants in China. They build 2 a week while we sit around and play tiddlywinks with solar panels and windmills, leaving our grid in Texas unreliable, now almost 50% wind and solar. And we have to go, wait, what happens on a windless, cloudy day? I don't know. How do you want to power up your schools or your hospitals or your homes or your businesses? Could it be that you have to rely on coal or gas or nuclear power? Of course you do. Yet my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, not here, of course with all due respect, neither are my colleagues on this side of the aisle with the exception of the speaker. It's just how we do things in Washington. This is debate. A $2 billion funding increase for the Internal Revenue Service is in the president's budget. Now, I want every American to understand that. They just passed a bill last summer, supposedly called the Inflation Reduction Act, that gives the IRS another $80 billion to expand. So that's what the American people want, is it? More IRS agents to go target more Americans to raise at most, by the CBO's own estimate, $100 to $200 billion over 10 years. So you're going to spend $80 billion to go target American citizens to bring in more money. By the way, the IRS targets poor people and minorities 3 to 5 times more than other Americans. So you're going to go hire more bureaucrats. You got $80 billion. And what does Biden do? He said, oh, that's not enough. $2 billion more for the IRS. Genius. $100 million at the Department of Education and grant funding for communities to promote racial and socioeconomic diversity in their schools. $62 million for the DOJ to exploit the FACE Act to target pro-life Americans. We could go on and on. The amount of money given to agency after agency, bureaucrat after bureaucrat to target the American people. The FBI to target my now friend Scott Smith in Loudoun County, whose daughter was assaulted in a school. He dared to go to the school board. He got challenged by law enforcement, and the DOJ was going to be putting him on a list as a domestic terrorist because the National School Board Association was colluding with the White House to do so. Is that what we want to fund? A Department of Justice that would put a dad on a list as a domestic terrorist because he went to a school board to try to defend his daughter who was assaulted in a bathroom. That's what this administration wants to prioritize. Funding a woke, weaponized bureaucracy that is undermining freedom.